Reality does not respond to hope. It responds to structure. This is not motivation. It's a manual for reality. Prologue. Why motivation never changed anything. Motivation feels powerful. It feels like movement, like awakening, like the beginning of change. But motivation has one fatal flaw. It disappears. This is why people who feel deeply motivated often remain exactly where they are. They watch videos, they read books, they feel inspired, they feel ready, and nothing changes, not structurally. The ancient observers noticed this long before modern language tried to romanticize motivation. They saw something uncomfortable and wrote it down without mercy. Emotion creates sensation, not position. Motivation is an emotional surge, a chemical rise, a temporary alignment of feeling. It does not alter where you stand in relation to reality. This is why motivated people stay trapped. They mistake internal movement for external shift. They feel different, so they assume life will respond differently. It doesn't, because reality does not respond to how you feel. It responds to how you are positioned. This is the first illusion this book dismantles. People say, "I feel better now," and expect results to follow. But results do not follow emotion. They follow structure. You can feel confident and still occupy a powerless position. You can feel hopeful and still stand beneath what you want. You can feel inspired and still behave from the same identity. Reality reads behavior, not feelings. This is why feeling good rarely changes outcomes. Feeling good makes waiting tolerable. Waiting extends the same life. Motivation does not break cycles, it decorates them. It gives the illusion of progress without requiring repositioning. This is why people return to motivation again and again. They need the feeling, because the structure remains unchanged. Motivation is attractive because it is safe. It does not demand loss. It does not demand identity death. It does not demand structural correction. It offers energy instead of consequence, and energy is cheap. The ancient teaching never treated motivation as power. They treated it as noise. They wrote that emotional intensity often delays transformation, because it convinces the mind that something meaningful has already happened. Nothing has. Not until position changes. This is the difference most people never learn. Energy moves internally. Position determines response externally. You can be energized and ignored. You can be calm and obeyed. Because reality does not negotiate with emotion. It reacts to posture, to consistency, to the silent signal of who occupies authority and who waits for permission. This is why people who don't care often move faster than those who desperately want. Not because they are lucky, because they are not leaning. Motivation always leans forward. Leaning signals lack of ground, and reality responds accordingly. This book does not exist to make you feel better, because feeling better does not correct position. It exists to show you why motivation never altered your life in a lasting way, even when it felt powerful, spiritual, or transformative, especially then. This book speaks in structure, not emotion, in mechanics, not encouragement, in position, not hope. Because hope waits, structure moves. This is not a book designed to lift you. It is designed to reposition you, and repositioning is uncomfortable. It removes the emotional cushion that motivation provides. It replaces feeling with alignment. This is why this is not motivational content. Motivation wants you energized. Reality wants you placed. And those two rarely coexist. The next chapters will not inspire you. They will strip away the emotional habits that keep you standing where you are, even while you feel like you are changing. Because the most dangerous lie is not hopelessness. It is believing that feeling ready means you already moved. It doesn't, and it never did. If motivation worked, your life would already look different. Chapter 1. Reality does not respond to desire. Desire feels like movement. It feels like direction, like intention, like effort aimed at something meaningful. But desire is not power, it is exposure. The ancient observers were precise about this, even when the conclusion disturbed those who read it. Desire creates structural inferiority. This is the first law most people never learn. When you desire something, you place it above you. You signal lack, not emotionally, structurally. Reality does not interpret desire as passion. It reads it as distance. This is why people who want deeply often receive nothing, while those who seem indifferent are met halfway. Desire announces need, and need is a position beneath. The ancient texts describe desire as a posture of reach. Reaching implies absence of ground. When you reach, you lean forward. When you lean, you lose balance. Reality does not stabilize what is unstable. This is why desire rarely produces lasting results. It creates motion without foundation. People believe desire is the engine of change. It isn't. It is the confession that change has not yet occurred. This is uncomfortable, so modern narratives invert it. They tell you to want more, to visualize harder, to amplify desire. The ancients warned that intensifying desire only deepens inferiority, because the louder the wanting, the clearer the lack. Reality is not persuaded by intensity. It responds to occupation. There is an invisible position occupied by those who desire. It is subtle, but reality reads it instantly. The position says, I am not there. I am waiting. I need reality to move first. And reality answers accordingly. It delays, it withholds, it tests, not to punish, but because systems respond to posture. Those who desire are asking. Those who occupy are standing. This is the difference. The world does not respond to who asks well. It responds to who is already there. This is why people who need money repel opportunity. Why those who want love attract inconsistency. Why those who desire respect are ignored, needing broadcasts dependence. Dependence creates instability. Instability is not rewarded. This is not moral. It is mechanical. Reality does not judge desire. It simply does not obey it. The ancient teaching explains that desire fractures authority. When you desire something, you unconsciously grant it control. Your mood responds to its absence. Your actions orbit around its acquisition. Your attention narrows. This places the desired object in command. And reality does not empower those who surrender command. This is why desire exhausts. It keeps you oriented towards something that has not acknowledged you. The more you desire, the more you wait. Waiting creates time. Time creates delay. Delay creates frustration. Frustration reinforces desire, and the loop continues. This is the cycle most people call manifestation. It is not. It is orbit. Orbit never arrives. The ancient observers were ruthless in their language. Desire keeps you circling what you will never occupy. Occupation is different. Occupation does not reach. It does not ask. It does not lean. Occupation is a silent fact. You do not desire the ground you are standing on. You stand on it. Reality responds to standing, not reaching. This is why people who occupy a position do not speak about wanting. They speak from assumption, from placement, from internal authority. They do not need to convince reality. Reality adjusts to them automatically. This is the distinction modern teachings erase. They confuse wanting with alignment. But wanting is misalignment acknowledged emotionally. Alignment is not felt. It is embodied. The ancient texts describe occupation as the moment where desire collapses, not because the object is obtained, but because the posture has changed. You no longer need reality to confirm anything. You move from asking to acting as if already placed. This is misunderstood. It is not pretending. It is not fantasy. It is structural congruence. When behavior, expectation, and tolerance align with a position, reality responds, not immediately with reward, but with access. Access is subtle, doors open without drama. Resistance decreases, timing shortens. This is why desire-based approaches fail quietly. They rely on emotional force. But emotional force is unstable. It rises and falls. Reality does not synchronize with volatility. It synchronizes with consistency. Consistency does not come from desire. It comes from identity. And identity is not changed by wanting. It is changed by occupation. This is why this book dismantles desire early. Because desire keeps you polite, hopeful, patient, waiting. Waiting is a position, and it is beneath response. The world responds quickly to those who do not wait. Not because they are aggressive, but because they are not dependent. Dependence slows everything down. The ancient teaching states something radical. Reality accelerates when you stop needing it. This sounds paradoxical, but it is precise. Needing positions you below, not needing positions you alongside, and alongside is where interaction happens. This is why some people seem to get lucky. They are not lucky, they are unentangled. Their behavior is not fueled by desperation, it is fueled by assumption. Assumption stabilizes posture. Stabilized posture receives response. This chapter exists to strip desire of its false authority, not to make you indifferent, but to make you grounded. Desire asks reality to move toward you. Occupation places you where reality already responds. This is the difference between hoping and commanding. Not verbally, structurally. The next chapter dismantles another illusion, just as dangerous. The belief that effort compensates for lack of position. It does not, and understanding why changes everything. Chapter 2. Less effort is not power. Effort feels virtuous. It feels like movement, like commitment, like proof that you deserve something. But effort is not power. It is exposure. The ancient observers noticed something that contradicted almost everything society praises. The more someone tries, the less authority they hold. This is not because effort is wrong. It is because effort broadcasts position. And the position of effort is beneath outcome. Effort says, I am not there yet. I need to compensate. I must prove. Reality listens carefully to these signals and responds accordingly. This is why people who work the hardest are often the least rewarded. Not morally, structurally. Effort does not create authority. Authority precedes effort. Those with authority act without strain. Those without authority strain to act. The strain is visible, and visibility removes power. The ancient texts describe effort as a form of negotiation. You trade energy for approval, time for validation, persistence for permission. And reality does not reward negotiation. It rewards assumption. This is why the world exploits those who try too much, not because it is cruel, but because trying reveals availability. Those who try too hard tolerate more, they wait longer, they accept less, and systems respond to tolerance by extending pressure. This is why over-effort leads to exhaustion, not elevation. You teach the world how to treat you by how much you are willing to give without position. Effort without authority trains reality to delay, to demand more, to extract. This is not punishment, it is calibration. The ancient observers rejected the idea of merit as a driving force. They called it a comforting myth. Merit soothes the ego, they wrote, but it does not move systems. The belief in merit says, if I work hard enough, reality will notice. Reality does notice, but noticing is not obeying. Hard work signals compliance, not command. This is why people who deserve more often receive less. Deserving is a moral argument. Reality is not moral. It is positional. This is the lie that keeps people exhausted and confused. They believe effort accumulates authority. It does not. Authority is assumed. Effort follows authority, not the other way around. Those in power do not prove themselves endlessly. They occupy, they decide, they act from placement. Effort, when it exists, is directed, not desperate, invisible, not performative. The ancient teaching draws a sharp distinction between trying and assuming. Trying is reaching toward an outcome. Assuming is behaving as if the outcome is already integrated. Trying seeks permission. Assuming withdraws negotiation. This is why reality responds differently. Trying invites evaluation. Assuming invites alignment. This explains why people who don't try that hard often succeed. They are not careless. They are positioned. Their actions are congruent with expectation, not fueled by hunger. Hunger is loud. Authority is quiet. Effort screams. Power whispers. This is why the world leans toward those who appear calm, even when they do less. Calm signals sufficiency. Sufficiency stabilizes response. The ancient observers noted that systems test those who over-effort. They add obstacles, they increase demands, they delay results. Because the system senses dependency. Dependency creates leverage, and leverage invites extraction. This is why people who give everything are often given nothing back. They surrendered position before negotiation even began. Effort also creates a dangerous illusion, righteousness. You feel entitled because you suffered, because you worked, because you tried. But entitlement without authority creates resentment. Resentment poisons perception, and poisoned perception recreates struggle. This is why effort-based lives feel unfair. They are built on a false exchange rate. Energy is spent where position should have been corrected. The ancient texts were blunt. Effort is not currency. Position is. You cannot buy response with exhaustion. You cannot purchase alignment with sacrifice. Sacrifice only deepens imbalance when it is offered from below. This is why the belief in trying harder collapses eventually. People burn out. They lose faith. They feel betrayed by life. But life did not betray them. It simply responded to posture. The posture said, I will keep going even without response, and reality said, then I will keep delaying. This chapter exists to dismantle the most dangerous advice ever given. Just try harder. Trying harder cements inferiority. Assuming dissolves it. This does not mean becoming arrogant. It means becoming placed. Placed people do not rush. They do not beg. They do not overextend. They act from sufficiency. They withdraw effort where authority is required. They stop proving. They start selecting. This is why reality responds to those who assume. Assumption stabilizes identity. Stable identity creates predictable behavior. Predictable behavior invites trust from systems. Trust accelerates response. This is not mystical. It is mechanical. Effort scatters energy, authority concentrates it. This is why effort without position is endless, and position without excessive effort is effective. The ancient teaching ends this chapter with a warning. When effort replaces position, power disappears. This book does not ask you to work harder. It asks you to stop trying to earn what can only be occupied. The next chapter reveals the core mechanism behind all response, why reality obeys position, not intention. And once you see it, effort will never feel powerful again. Chapter 3. Reality obeys position, not intention. Intention feels important. It feels conscious, moral, directed. People believe intention carries weight. They say, my intentions are good. They say, I meant well. They say, that wasn't my intention. And yet, reality responds as if none of this matters, because it doesn't. The ancient observers were precise about this. Intention is invisible to systems. It exists internally, privately, silently. Reality does not read inner narratives. It reads position. This is the technical core most teachings avoid. Position is not what you want. It is not what you believe. It is not what you hope. Position is where you are standing internally when you act. It is the unspoken posture beneath behavior. Two people can say the same words, perform the same actions, pursue the same outcome, and receive completely different responses. Not because reality is unfair, but because position was different. Position is communicated through consistency, tolerance, expectation, and reaction. It is revealed by what you accept, by what you wait for, by what you explain away, by what you repeatedly endure. This is why intention fails. Intention is a statement. Position is a signal. Reality responds only to signals. The ancient teaching explains that intention often comforts the self while leaving position untouched. You intend to be respected, but tolerate disrespect. You intend to be loved, but accept inconsistency. You intend to be abundant, but negotiate from lack. Your intention speaks one language, your position speaks another. Reality listens to the louder one, and position is always louder. This is why people are confused. They believe life ignored their intention. It didn't. It responded accurately to their posture. The internal position is formed long before action. It is the silent agreement you have with outcomes. It says things like, "This is normal. This is what I get. This is how it usually goes." These statements are rarely conscious, but they dictate behavior, and behavior communicates position instantly. The ancient observers described position as an internal coordinate. Like latitude and longitude, reality does not argue with coordinates. It meets you where you are. This is why intention does nothing without positional change. You can intend confidence and still move hesitantly. You can intend authority and still ask for permission. You can intend freedom and still behave cautiously. Reality responds to the hesitation, to the asking, to the caution, not to the intention. This becomes painfully clear in relationships. Someone may intend to be treated well, but they remain available when they are undervalued. They explain behavior that should be unacceptable. They wait for clarity that never arrives. Their intention says, "I want consistency." Their position says, "I will tolerate uncertainty." Reality responds to tolerance. In money, the same rule applies. People intend abundance, but their position is scarcity. They hesitate to invest. They fear loss. They overvalue security. They underassume opportunity. Their behavior broadcasts containment. Reality responds with limitation, not as punishment, as alignment. Respect operates under the same mechanics. No one receives respect because they want it. Respect is given to those whose position does not allow disrespect to land. This is why asking for respect fails, and withdrawing availability often succeeds. The world tests boundaries instinctively. When boundaries are internal, they are felt externally. Position creates automatic response because it removes negotiation. When position is clear, behavior aligns effortlessly. You do not explain yourself endlessly. You do not chase validation. You do not over-adjust. This coherence stabilizes response. Reality prefers stability. Instability confuses systems, and confusion delays response. This is why people with unclear position experience inconsistent outcomes. One day things work. The next, they collapse, because intention fluctuates. Position does not, or rather it fluctuates unconsciously. The ancient observers insisted that position is revealed under pressure, not when things are calm. Pressure exposes posture, how you react to delay, to silence, to rejection, to uncertainty. These reactions tell reality everything it needs to know. This is why saying, "I intend to be different," never works under stress. Stress bypasses intention. It exposes position. This is why structural change requires internal repositioning before external action. not affirmations, not declarations, but behavioral shifts that reflect new tolerance levels, new expectations, new defaults. Position is also why reality seems to test people. Tests are not moral, they are diagnostic. Reality probes consistency. It asks, will this posture hold? If it collapses, reality adjusts downward. If it holds, reality aligns upward. This is not conscious, it is mechanical. This chapter exists to clarify one brutal truth. Reality does not need your explanation, it needs your congruence. Intention without congruence is ignored. Congruence without intention still works. This is why people who cannot articulate what they want often succeed. Their position is clear, their behavior matches expectation, reality responds. This is also why people who speak beautifully remain stuck. Their language does not match their posture. Reality chooses posture every time. Position creates response automatically because it removes friction. No persuasion, no convincing, no forcing, just alignment. This is why once position changes, outcomes shift quietly. Without drama, without motivation, without effort. Things begin to work for no reason. The reason is position. The ancient teaching ends this chapter with a statement most people are not ready to accept. Reality never misunderstood you. It responded exactly to where you stood. This book does not teach intention, it teaches placement. Because once you are placed, reality has no choice but to respond. The next chapter reveals the interface through which position is communicated, identity, and why changing behavior without changing identity always collapses. Chapter 4. Identity is the interface. Reality does not respond to thoughts. It responds to identity. This is where everything becomes serious. Identity is not how you describe yourself. It is not your values. It is not your aspirations. Identity is the interface through which reality reads you. Just as a system responds differently to different operating systems, reality responds differently to different identities. The commands may look similar on the surface, but the underlying interface determines what executes and what fails. This is why changing thoughts rarely changes outcomes. Thoughts are inputs. Identity is the system that interprets them. The ancient observers understood identity as a silent constant. It does not speak. It does not announce itself. But it filters every action, reaction, tolerance, and expectation. You can change what you think. But if the interface remains the same, reality receives the same signal. This is the core mistake of most manifestation teachings. They attempt to modify surface commands while leaving the operating system untouched. They tell you to think differently, to visualize, to affirm. But identity does not change through persuasion. It changes through replacement. Identity is formed through repetition, not belief. It is stabilized by what you tolerate, what you expect, and what you repeatedly survive. This is why someone can think confident thoughts and still behave submissively under pressure, because identity reveals itself when thinking stops. Pressure bypasses cognition. It exposes interface. Reality reads identity through consistency, not through words, not through emotion, through behavior that does not require effort. Effort indicates conflict between thought and identity. When identity is aligned, behavior is effortless. This is why people with stable identities do not motivate themselves, they simply act. And reality responds to this automatically. Identity communicates through defaults. What you do when no one is watching. What you accept without debate. What you assume without evidence. These defaults are the interface. The ancient texts describe identity as a gravitational field. It bends outcomes toward itself, not because of desire, but because of coherence. Coherent identities produce predictable behavior. Predictable behavior produces trust. Trust accelerates response. This is why reality appears to favor certain people, not because they are chosen, but because their interface is stable. They do not contradict themselves internally. This stability makes response efficient. Changing thoughts without changing identity creates internal contradiction. You say one thing, you feel another, you act from a third place. Reality does not respond to fragmentation. It responds to alignment. This is why people experience inconsistency. Some days things work, some days they collapse, because identity is unstable, not because reality is random. Identity instability produces mixed signals. Mixed signals delay response. The ancient observers were precise about how identity is read. They identified 4 primary channels: tolerance, expectation, reaction, boundary. These 4 communicate identity instantly. What you tolerate defines your baseline. What you expect defines your ceiling. How you react defines your posture. What you refuse defines your authority. Thoughts do not alter these channels. Behavior does. This is why affirmations feel powerful, but collapse under pressure. Because pressure exposes identity, not intention. This is also why trying to manifest without changing identity creates exhaustion. You are issuing commands the system cannot execute. The interface rejects them. And the rejection feels like failure. It is not failure. It is incompatibility. You cannot manifest abundance from an identity structured around scarcity. You cannot manifest respect from an identity structured around tolerance. You cannot manifest freedom from an identity structured around permission-seeking. The commands conflict with the interface. Reality does not negotiate compatibility. It simply executes what fits. This is why identity change feels threatening, because it requires loss. Loss of familiar reactions, loss of familiar roles, loss of familiar emotional homes. Identity is protected by comfort, even painful comfort. Changing identity feels like betrayal of self, but the ancient teaching clarifies something crucial. Identity is not who you are. It is who you learn to be in order to survive, and survival identities eventually block expansion. This is why manifestation attempts that avoid identity change fail quietly. They avoid the one thing that matters. You cannot install new outcomes on an old interface. The error is structural. The ancient observers also warned against cosmetic identity shifts, adopting new language, new aesthetics, new rituals, without changing tolerance and expectation. These create appearance without function. Reality is not fooled by appearance. It reads function. This is why some people look confident but remain ignored, why some people speak powerfully but remain powerless. Their interface did not change. Only their decoration did. Identity is rewritten through decisive moments. Moments where you do not react the old way. Moments where you withdraw tolerance. Moments where you maintain boundary under pressure. These moments update the interface, not affirmations, not motivation. Behavior under tension. This is why identity change feels lonely, because it removes familiar scripts. Others still interact with the old interface, and when you do not respond as expected, friction arises. This friction is not proof of error. It is proof of update. Reality responds slowly at first to identity change, because it tests consistency, it probes, it applies pressure to see if the new interface holds. If it collapses, reality reverts. If it stabilizes, reality aligns. This is why identity change requires patience without negotiation. You do not convince reality, you demonstrate coherence. Once coherence is established, response becomes automatic. No effort, no forcing, no explanation. This chapter exists to remove the last illusion that you can change results without changing identity. You cannot. Identity is the interface, and reality executes exactly what the interface allows. The next chapter reveals something most people overlook. Reality has been responding the entire time. You simply did not recognize how. And once you see it, confusion ends. Chapter 5. The world is always responding. You just don't notice how. Most people believe nothing is happening. They say, "I tried everything." They say, "Nothing works." They say, "Life doesn't respond to me." This belief feels honest, it feels earned. But it is incorrect. The world is always responding, relentlessly, continuously, silently. The problem is not absence of response. The problem is misrecognition. People expect response to look like reward. They wait for dramatic change, for clear confirmation, for visible success. When it doesn't arrive that way, they assume failure. The ancient observers warned against this mistake. They wrote, "Reality rarely answers loudly. It answers structurally, subtly, incrementally, and those who are not trained to read structure mistake response for silence." This is why people feel ignored. They are waiting for applause, while reality is adjusting access. Reality responds first by reducing friction, by slightly changing timing, by shifting who answers and who doesn't, by altering what feels available and what feels resistant. These changes are not emotional, they are logistical. This is why people miss them. They are looking for signs. Reality offers signals. Signals are not comforting, they are functional. The world responds by testing coherence. When your position stabilizes, reality stops contradicting you. Small things begin to align, not dramatically, practically. A message arrives sooner, a delay disappears, an obstacle no longer appears. These are responses, but they are dismissed because they do not feel miraculous. The ancient teaching explains that reality responds proportionally. It does not leap ahead of your position, it meets it. This is why people who expect instant transformation miss gradual alignment. They interpret gradual change as stagnation. It isn't, it is precision. Reality calibrates slowly to ensure stability. If it responded too fast, most identities would collapse under pressure. This is why early responses are subtle. They test whether you notice, whether you maintain coherence, whether you revert under neutrality. Most people fail here. They say, "This is nothing," and they return to old behaviors, old tolerance, old expectations. And reality adjusts back, not as punishment, as reflection. This is why people feel stuck. They are oscillating between positions. Reality mirrors oscillation with inconsistency. People also miss response because they believe response must be positive. They think reality only responds by giving. But reality also responds by removing. It removes access that no longer matches your position. It removes distractions. It removes options that supported old identity. These removals feel like loss, so people resist them. They fight to keep what reality is withdrawing, not realizing withdrawal is alignment. The ancient observers wrote, "When reality removes, it is still responding." It is removing what no longer fits, but people interpret removal as rejection and revert. This is why coherence matters. Coherence allows you to recognize response even when it is uncomfortable. Incoherence blinds you. You only notice what flatters your expectation. Everything else feels like failure. Reality also responds through absence. This is one of the hardest responses to recognize. When a familiar struggle stops appearing, when a recurring problem no longer returns, when the emotional charge disappears. People often feel uneasy here. They say, "Nothing is happening." But what is happening is nothing is repeating. This is a response, and a powerful one. The world also responds by changing how others interact with you, not through declarations, through tone, through timing, through effort. Someone stops challenging you. Someone stops demanding explanations. Someone adjusts behavior without discussion. These are structural acknowledgements. They do not feel emotional, so they are ignored. People wait for apologies. Reality offers adjustment. Adjustment is more reliable than apology, but it is quieter. The ancient teaching emphasizes the role of coherence in perception. Coherence is the alignment between identity, behavior, and expectation. When coherence is high, perception sharpens. You notice patterns quickly. You see cause and effect clearly. When coherence is low, perception dulls. You miss connections. You misattribute cause. You blame randomness. This is why people say life is chaotic. Chaos is often just unreadable structure, and unreadable structure comes from incoherent position. Reality is always responding, but it responds to the whole system, not to isolated actions, not to isolated intentions, not to isolated efforts. It responds to consistency. This is why sporadic changes do nothing, why bursts of discipline collapse, why moments of clarity fade. Reality does not respond to moments, it responds to maintenance. The ancient observers warned that most people abandon coherence too early. They see small response and demand large confirmation. When it doesn't arrive, they withdraw. They re-enter old posture. Reality responds again by returning old patterns, and the person concludes nothing works. This is not reality failing. This is impatience erasing alignment. The world is not dramatic, it is efficient. It does not reward enthusiasm, it rewards stability. This is why those who change quietly often advance faster. They are not scanning for proof, they are maintaining position. And maintenance deepens response. The ancient teaching also clarifies why over-analysis blocks perception. When you constantly evaluate whether something is working, you introduce doubt into posture. Doubt fragments coherence. Fragmented coherence produces mixed signals. Reality responds with delay, not denial. Delay frustrates. Frustration weakens position. The cycle repeats. This is why the instruction is not to watch for results. It is to observe response. Results are outcomes. Response is process. Those who understand response stop asking, "Is this working?" They ask, "What adjusted?" This question sharpens perception. It reveals movement. Movement confirms alignment. This chapter exists to correct a dangerous misunderstanding. Nothing ever stopped working. You simply were not trained to recognize response. Once you learn to read structure instead of emotion, the world becomes predictable. Not boring, predictable. And predictability is power, because when you can read response, you can adjust position before collapse. You stop overcorrecting, you stop reverting, you stop negotiating with silence. You begin to trust alignment over reassurance. The world has been speaking to you the entire time, not in feelings, not in signs, in structure. And once you learn this language, confusion disappears. The next chapter dismantles the last emotional trap that keeps people cycling. Why motivation itself becomes an addiction, and how it quietly undermines coherence every time it appears. Chapter 6. Motivation is an emotional drug. Motivation does not empower you, it stimulates you. This distinction changes everything. The ancient observers did not treat motivation as fuel. They treated it as chemistry, a spike, a rush, a temporary elevation of emotion. Motivation feels productive because it alters your internal state quickly. Dopamine rises, adrenaline activates, focus narrows. For a brief moment you feel capable, but capability is not structure. It is sensation, and sensation fades. This is why motivation never lasts. It was never designed to. The body cannot maintain chemical peaks without crashing. This is the first reason motivation creates frustration. It promises continuity through a mechanism that guarantees decline. The ancient texts describe motivation as a borrowed state. You borrow energy from the future, and the body collects the debt. This is why, after motivation fades, people feel heavier than before, not neutral, depleted. They interpret this depletion as failure, but it is simply biology. Motivation hijacks the nervous system. It overrides resistance temporarily, but override is not reprogramming. Once the chemicals normalize, the original structure resumes control. This is why motivated action collapses. Not because you lacked will, but because will was never the source of power. Motivation also creates dependency. This is rarely acknowledged. People become addicted not to action, but to the feeling of readiness. They wait until they feel motivated, until they feel aligned, until they feel inspired. This waiting becomes the new barrier. Action is postponed until emotion permits it. This is the trap. The ancient observers warned that motivation trains the mind to associate action with emotional permission. And emotional permission is unstable. This is why people consume motivation endlessly. They chase the feeling, they watch videos, they read quotes, they listen to speeches, not to act, but to feel able to act. This is chemical procrastination. It feels productive, it is not. Motivation creates cycles of intensity followed by collapse. People surge forward, then retreat, then surge again, then retreat again. They call this inconsistency. The ancients called it dependence on stimulation. This cycle exhausts identity. Each crash reinforces the belief that something is wrong with me. Nothing is wrong. The method is flawed. Motivation also distorts perception. During the spike, people overestimate capacity. They commit too much. They promise too much. They assume permanence from a temporary state. Then the crash arrives, and reality feels hostile. Not because reality changed, but because the chemical state did. This is why motivated decisions often lead to regret. They were made from an altered state, not from structure. The ancient teaching draws a sharp contrast between motivation and discipline. Discipline is not emotional. It does not require stimulation. It does not spike. It does not crash. Discipline is structural. It operates independently of mood. This is why disciplined people appear calm. They are not fighting resistance. They have removed negotiation. Motivation negotiates with emotion. Discipline bypasses it. The ancient observers wrote, "Emotion asks permission. Structure gives instruction. Motivation asks, 'Do I feel like this?' Discipline asks nothing. It executes from identity." This is why discipline feels boring to those addicted to motivation. There is no rush, no excitement, no narrative, just repetition. But repetition from structure creates stability, and stability produces results. Motivation also creates a dangerous illusion, meaning. People believe that feeling motivated means the action matters more, that it is aligned, that it is significant. This is false. Meaning does not come from emotion. It comes from consistency. Consistency builds trajectory. Trajectory builds identity. Identity creates authority. Authority produces response. Motivation interrupts this chain. It introduces variability. Variability confuses systems. Reality responds poorly to inconsistency. This is why emotionally driven lives feel chaotic, peaks and crashes, hope and disappointment, excitement and burnout. The ancient observers were blunt. Motivation is noise in a system that requires signal. Signal is coherence. Motivation disrupts coherence. It amplifies feeling while fragmenting position. This is why motivated people often speak passionately but act sporadically. And reality responds to action, not speech. Motivation also masks avoidance. This is uncomfortable. People consume motivation to avoid confronting structure. They feel productive without changing identity. They feel aligned without repositioning. They feel progress without cost. This is why motivation is popular. It offers relief without consequence. Structure demands consequence, identity loss, tolerance withdrawal, boundary enforcement. Motivation demands nothing. It entertains. The ancient teaching does not demonize motivation. It simply places it correctly. Motivation is a stimulant, not a foundation. Using motivation as a foundation guarantees collapse. This is why people who rely on motivation never stabilize. They oscillate, and oscillation prevents authority. Authority requires predictability. Predictability requires structure. Structure requires discipline. Discipline is not punishment. It is alignment without emotion. This is why disciplined people do not speak much about motivation. They do not need it. Their identity executes automatically. This chapter exists to dismantle one of the most socially accepted addictions, the addiction to feeling ready. Readiness is emotional. Position is structural. Reality responds to the latter. When you stop waiting to feel motivated, action becomes quieter, less dramatic, but more effective. The world stops responding to your highs and lows and starts responding to your consistency. This is the transition most people resist because it feels flat. But flat is stable and stability is power. The next chapter reveals why belief itself is overrated and why structure defeats belief every time without exception. Chapter 7. Structure beats belief. Belief feels powerful. It feels intentional, convincing, moral. People say, if you believe, it will happen. They say faith moves mountains. They say you just have to believe. And yet, belief fails constantly, not occasionally, consistently. The ancient observers were unapologetic about this. Belief does nothing by itself. It comforts the mind. It organizes hope, but it does not move systems. Belief is internal agreement. Structure is external instruction. Reality responds only to instruction. This is the fracture most people never resolve. They believe strongly while living incoherently. They hold faith while behaving from fear. They declare certainty while maintaining the same tolerance. Reality does not negotiate with declarations. It executes structure. This is why belief alone changes nothing. Belief without structure is commentary, not command. The ancient texts describe belief as a narrative layer placed over behavior. It explains, it justifies, it motivates, but it does not alter default action. And default action is where reality reads you. This is why people with strong faith often remain stuck. Their belief floats above their structure. It never enters it. They believe they deserve more, but they tolerate less. They believe they are powerful, but they wait for permission. They believe they are aligned, but they negotiate with fear. Reality responds to negotiation, not belief. The ancient observers were fascinated by a paradox. Some people with no belief succeed effortlessly. They are not spiritual. They are not hopeful. They are not positive. And yet, life responds. Not because they are special, because their structure is clean. They act consistently. They do not contradict themselves. They do not tolerate what conflicts with their direction. They do not need faith. Their habits communicate authority. This is the part that offends belief-based systems. Because it removes moral superiority, it shows that faith is not currency, coherence is. Structure beats belief because structure is legible. Belief is private. Reality cannot read your inner conviction. It reads your repeated behavior. It reads what you do when nothing is watching. It reads what you allow when you are tired. It reads what you revert to under pressure. This is why belief collapses under stress. Stress exposes structure, and structure wins. The ancient teaching draws a sharp line between superficial belief and embedded structure. Superficial belief exists in language. Embedded structure exists in habit. Habit is belief made physical. This is why habits are more powerful than affirmations. Affirmations speak to the mind. Habits instruct the system. Reality listens to instruction. This is why people who repeat the same small actions consistently outperform those who believe passionately but act sporadically. Consistency creates trust. Trust creates access. Access accelerates response. Belief creates none of this. Belief is unstable. It rises and falls with emotion. Structure persists regardless of mood. This is why structure outlasts enthusiasm. The ancient observers also warned against confusing belief with identity. Belief can be adopted quickly. Identity cannot. Identity is reinforced by repetition. And repetition is habit. Habit is the invisible architecture of identity. This is why the role of the invisible habit is critical. Invisible habits are behaviors you no longer debate. They do not require decision. They do not require motivation. They simply execute. These habits broadcast identity clearly, and identity instructs reality automatically. This is why people who succeed quietly often appear boring. Their lives lack emotional spectacle, but their structure is solid. They are predictable, and predictability is power. The ancient teaching states something most people resist. Belief feels powerful because it is easy. Structure is powerful because it is costly. Structure requires sacrifice, not dramatic sacrifice, but silent sacrifice, the sacrifice of convenience, the sacrifice of emotional negotiation, the sacrifice of old tolerance. Belief demands nothing. You can believe anything without changing behavior. Structure demands congruence, and congruence exposes inconsistency. This is why people prefer belief. It flatters the self, it avoids loss, it avoids confrontation with habit. But reality does not care what flatters you. It cares what stabilizes you. This is also why belief-based systems often shame failure. They say, "You didn't believe enough." This shifts blame to the individual while protecting the method. The ancient observers rejected this completely. They said failure occurs when belief attempts to replace structure, not because belief was weak, but because it was irrelevant. Structure cannot be skipped. You cannot believe your way past habit. You must replace it. This is where discipline returns, not as punishment, as architecture. Discipline installs structure, not through force, through repetition without negotiation. This is why discipline feels cold, impersonal. But impersonal systems are reliable. Belief is personal, and personal systems are volatile. This chapter exists to dismantle the final illusion that conviction creates outcomes. It doesn't. Outcomes are created by the quiet, repeated instructions you give reality through behavior. Those instructions are called structure. Belief may inspire structure, but it cannot replace it. When belief and structure align, belief becomes irrelevant. The system runs on habit. This is why the most powerful people do not speak about faith. They speak about standards. Standards are structure, and structure is what reality obeys. The next chapter exposes why inconsistency is punished so quickly by reality, and why starting and stopping is worse than never starting at all. Chapter 8. Why reality punishes inconsistency. Inconsistency is not neutral. It is not harmless. It is not a phase. It is a signal, and reality responds to it immediately. This is where most people misunderstand what is happening to them. They think reality is being unfair. They think they are being tested. They think something external is blocking them. The ancient observers disagreed. They wrote something precise and unsettling. Reality does not punish failure. It punishes incoherence. Inconsistency communicates instability, and systems do not cooperate with instability. This is not emotional, it is structural. Inconsistent behavior makes you unreadable. Unreadable systems are avoided, delayed, or deprioritized. This is why inconsistency leads to loss of respect, not only from people, from reality itself. Respect is not given to intention, it is given to predictability. When your behavior fluctuates, reality cannot align with you. It does not know where to meet you. So it pulls back. This withdrawal feels like punishment. It is not. It is recalibration. The ancient teaching explains that reality continuously tests coherence, not once, not dramatically, but constantly. Every delay, every challenge, every obstacle. These are not moral trials, they are diagnostics. Reality is asking one question: will this posture hold under pressure? If it collapses, reality adjusts downward. If it holds, reality stabilizes upward. This is why people experience rapid loss of momentum after inconsistency. They start something. They show up. They change posture briefly. Reality begins to respond. Then they retreat. They hesitate. They negotiate. Reality withdraws response. This feels cruel, but from a structural perspective it is accurate. Reality does not respond to beginnings. It responds to maintenance. Starting is easy. Stopping is revealing. The moment you stop, you teach reality that your position is conditional. Conditional positions do not receive trust. Trust is what accelerates response. Without trust, everything slows down. This is why starting and stopping is worse than never starting. Never starting communicates nothing. Starting and stopping communicates unreliability. Unreliability degrades position faster than absence. This is why people who half commit feel more resistance than those who never try. They destabilize their own signal. The ancient observers described inconsistency as signal noise. You send mixed instructions. Reality cannot execute mixed instructions, so it delays. Delay frustrates. Frustration weakens posture. The cycle repeats. This is why inconsistent lives feel exhausting. Not because life is hard, because the person is constantly fighting the consequences of their own instability. Inconsistency also creates entitlement. People believe effort should count even if it was temporary. They say, I tried. I showed up for a while. I was serious once. Reality does not track intention history. It tracks current posture. Past effort does not accumulate authority. Only present coherence does. This is why returning after inconsistency feels harder than starting from zero. You are not starting fresh. You are correcting degraded trust. This is the part no one explains. Reality remembers inconsistency, not emotionally, structurally. It slows response because the last signal collapsed. The ancient teaching states something brutally honest. Every time you retreat, the next advance requires more proof. This is why people feel like things get harder. They are not being punished. They are being asked to demonstrate stability. Stability is proven through duration, not intensity. This is why emotional surges fail. They spike. They impress the self. They do not convince reality. Reality responds to calm repetition, not dramatic effort. Inconsistency also erodes internal authority. You stop trusting yourself. You doubt your own decisions. This doubt leaks into behavior. Behavior hesitates. Reality responds to hesitation with delay. This reinforces doubt. The loop deepens. This is why inconsistency is dangerous. It compounds. The ancient observers warned that the most destructive form of inconsistency is identity switching. One day you behave as if you are placed. The next you revert to asking. One day you enforce boundaries. The next you explain them away. This switching confuses systems. People adjust behavior based on your last signal. When signals change, respect erodes, not because others are cruel, but because they cannot orient themselves. This applies to money, relationships, work, and self-respect. Reality treats inconsistency as unreliability, and unreliability is not rewarded. The world favors those who are boringly consistent, not exciting, not dramatic, predictable. Predictability reduces friction. Reduced friction accelerates outcomes. This is why disciplined lives feel easier over time, not because the person is special, because reality has learned how to respond. The ancient teaching also clarifies why people experience sudden collapse after inconsistency. They say, everything was going well, then it fell apart. It did not fall apart. Reality was waiting to see if coherence would hold. When it didn't, reality adjusted. This adjustment feels harsh, but it is accurate. Reality does not punish inconsistency out of malice. It withdraws cooperation, and cooperation is what most people mistake for luck. This chapter exists to remove a comforting lie, that inconsistency is harmless. It is not. It trains reality to hesitate with you. It teaches the world not to invest in your direction. The solution is not intensity, it is continuity, not perfection, stability. The ancient observers ended this teaching with a warning. If you want reality to move with you, you must stop moving away from yourself. Consistency is not about force. It is about refusal to retreat. When you stop retreating, reality stops testing, and when reality stops testing, response accelerates quietly. The next chapter reveals the psychological shift that ends negotiation entirely. The moment you stop asking, and why that moment changes everything. Chapter 9. The moment you stop asking. There is a day when something subtle shifts. Nothing explodes. Nothing announces itself, but asking ends. This is not the day you feel confident. It is the day you stop negotiating. The ancient observers marked this moment carefully because it separates two entirely different ways of existing. Before this moment, life feels like a conversation. You request, you hope, you explain, you wait. After this moment, life feels like execution. Not aggressive, not dramatic, decisive. The moment you stop asking is not loud because it is not emotional. It is positional. Asking is not merely verbal. It is behavioral. It shows up in how you wait, how you hesitate, how you tolerate delay, how you explain yourself. Asking is embedded in posture. The ancient teaching explains that asking places reality above you, even when you are polite, even when you are spiritual, even when you are respectful. Asking says, I need approval. I need permission. I need confirmation. Reality does not argue with this. It responds accurately. It delays, it withholds, it evaluates, not to punish, but because you positioned yourself beneath decision. The moment you stop asking, posture changes. You do not announce it. You do not declare it. You simply stop adjusting yourself around response. You stop pre-negotiating rejection. You stop preparing explanations. You stop bracing for disappointment. This is why the shift is internal first. The ancient observers describe this moment as withdrawal from dialogue, not silence. Withdrawal. You are no longer in discussion with reality. You are acting from placement. This is where most people misunderstand what is happening. They think stopping asking means becoming demanding. It does not. Demanding is still negotiation. It is louder asking. The shift is quieter. You stop framing action as a request. You act as if response is already integrated. Not guaranteed, integrated. This is the difference between asking and acting from. Asking waits for permission before movement. Acting from moves without consulting outcome. This terrifies most people. Because asking feels safe. If you ask and fail, you can say you tried. If you ask and are rejected, you can retreat. When you stop asking, you remove this safety net. You no longer perform humility. You perform alignment. Alignment is exposed. There is no one to blame. No request denied. No permission withheld. Only execution. This is why stopping asking feels dangerous. It collapses excuses. The ancient teaching explains that the nervous system resists this moment because asking postpones responsibility. When you ask, you are waiting. Waiting delays ownership. Ownership is heavy. It means if things do not move, it is because of placement, not because you were denied. This is why so many people remain in asking posture for decades. They are not weak. They are protecting themselves from authorship. Asking keeps hope alive. Stopping asking requires certainty without reassurance, and certainty without reassurance feels empty at first. This is why the moment you stop asking often feels anticlimactic. There is no emotional reward, no confirmation, just silence, and silence terrifies identities built on reaction. The ancient observers wrote, "Asking fills the space, authority empties it." When you stop asking, space appears. Nothing rushes in immediately. Reality pauses, not because it resists, but because you are no longer prompting response. This pause is misinterpreted as stagnation. It is not. It is recalibration. Reality is adjusting to a new posture, the posture that no longer leans forward, the posture that does not request validation, the posture that moves without pre-approval. This is why things often feel slower right after you stop asking. Not because nothing is happening, but because the old rhythm has ended. Negotiation had tempo, execution has none. Execution waits for necessity, not emotion. The ancient teaching clarifies something most people fear. When you stop asking, you will lose access to familiar responses. The people who responded to your need may disappear. The situations that fed your hope may end. This is not loss. It is disconnection from dependence. Dependence was built on asking. When asking ends, dependent structures dissolve. This is why people experience relational shifts at this stage. Some people feel offended. They say you changed. They say you are distant. What they feel is the absence of request. They were used to responding. Now there is nothing to respond to. This reveals who related to you through need, not through presence. Stopping asking also changes internal dialogue. You stop rehearsing outcomes. You stop predicting rejection. You stop explaining why something might not work. This quiet is unsettling, because the mind was trained to stay busy in negotiation. Without negotiation, the mind loses its role. This is why many people rush back to asking. They miss the familiar anxiety. It made them feel engaged. The ancient observers warned, the most dangerous temptation is returning to asking after you have stopped, because asking reopens the loop. It reinstates hierarchy. It tells reality you are unsure again, and reality responds instantly. This is why the moment you stop asking must be protected. Not emotionally, structurally. You protect it by acting without commentary, without checking, without waiting for response. This does not mean recklessness, it means non-dependence. You no longer require reaction to validate action. This is the psychological turn, the shift from seeking feedback to maintaining position, the shift from hope to orientation. This is why this moment changes everything, not because outcomes explode, but because internal authority stabilizes. Once internal authority stabilizes, reality aligns gradually, without apology, without enthusiasm, without permission. This chapter exists to reveal the truth most people never hear. Asking was never humility. It was hesitation disguised as virtue. Stopping asking is not arrogance, it is coherence, and coherence removes negotiation from the system. The next chapter is the final consolidation, the point where everything stops being theory and becomes manual, not motivational, structural, definitive. Chapter 10. This is the manual. How reality actually works. At this point, emotion is no longer required. Everything that needed to seduce has already failed. This chapter exists to remove interpretation. No encouragement, no symbolism, no inspiration. Only structure. Reality does not work by belief, desire, effort, faith, or intention. Those were never the mechanisms. They were interpretations layered on top of behavior. What actually moves reality is position, and position is maintained through structure. This book did not introduce a philosophy. It exposed a system that has always been operating. Whether you understood it or not, whether you agreed with it or not, reality never waited for your awareness. It responded anyway. The difference now is that the responses are no longer mysterious. They are legible. The first rule is simple and uncomfortable. Reality responds to what you consistently demonstrate, not to what you feel or think. Consistency is not emotional repetition. It is structural continuity. If your behavior contradicts itself, reality pauses. If your posture collapses under pressure, reality recalibrates downward. If your standards fluctuate, reality withholds cooperation. This is not judgment, it is alignment mechanics. The second rule is equally direct. Desire lowers position. Desire signals lack. Lack places you beneath response. The world does not punish desire, it deprioritizes it. Reality moves toward occupancy, not longing. This is why wanting more rarely creates more. It announces absence. The third rule clarifies confusion around effort. Effort without authority is invisible. Trying harder does not elevate position. It exposes instability. Effort only matters when it expresses identity. Otherwise, it communicates struggle. And struggle is not power. The fourth rule eliminates illusion. Belief does not instruct systems. Structure does. Belief without habit changes nothing. Faith without posture is decorative. Reality cannot read conviction. It reads execution. The fifth rule explains inconsistency. Starting and stopping degrades trust. Reality remembers collapse, not emotionally, structurally. Each retreat increases the cost of the next advance. This is why stability is rare, and why stable people move faster with less force. The sixth rule explains motivation. Motivation is stimulation, not architecture. It excites action temporarily. It does not build identity. Identity is built by repetition without negotiation. Anything that requires emotional permission is unreliable. The seventh rule marks the psychological shift. Asking places you beneath outcome. When you ask, you wait. When you wait, you defer authority. Reality responds accordingly. When asking ends, hierarchy collapses. Execution begins. This is the moment reality adjusts. Not instantly, accurately. The final rule is the one most people resist. Reality is neither spiritual nor material. It is structural. Spiritual language tries to moralize outcomes. Material language tries to mechanize them. Both miss the point. Reality responds to coherence. Coherence between identity, habit, tolerance, and action. This is why rituals fail when posture remains unchanged. This is why money avoids people who think they are unworthy. This is why respect collapses when boundaries wobble. This is why relationships decay when identity fragments. This is why silence creates power. This is why consistency feels boring but wins. This is why authority is quiet. This manual does not promise happiness. It does not promise ease. It does not promise alignment. It explains response. Response is automatic, impersonal, relentless. Once you understand this, reality stops feeling personal. And this is the greatest relief most people will ever experience. You are no longer chosen or rejected. You are responded to. You are no longer blocked or blessed. You are mirrored. You are no longer unlucky or favored. You are aligned or incoherent. This removes hope and replaces it with control, not emotional control, structural control, the kind that does not depend on mood, the kind that does not require belief, the kind that does not collapse under pressure. This is why this book is not motivation. Motivation tries to move the self. This manual shows you how to move position. Once position changes, outcomes follow without persuasion. This is not manifestation, it is orientation. This is not spirituality, it is mechanics. This is not materialism, it is systems logic. And this is why most people will reject this book, because it offers no comfort. Only responsibility, responsibility without shame, responsibility without punishment, responsibility without reward, just consequence, clean, predictable, fair. This is the manual. Reality has always worked this way. Now you know. And once you know, the system will no longer tolerate pretending, not because it is cruel, but because coherence demands consistency. From this point forward, there is no motivation, only placement, no hope, only structure, no asking, only execution. This is not the end, it is the removal of illusion. And what remains is not mystical, it is functional, and it works whether you like it or not. Reality never needed your motivation, it was waiting for your position. Subscribe to Hidden Library Archives. Some knowledge is not meant to inspire, it's meant to correct.